The security guard standing at the entrance looked like he was fed up with everything. He checked passes, checked some lists, and from time to time, glanced discontentedly at those who tried to slip in without an invitation. The event promised to be one of the largest in the city. The film crew of a famous director organized a closed screening for selected guests, mainly industry representatives and sponsors ready to invest in future projects. Access to the press was limited, and ordinary viewers were completely forbidden. That is why many hung around the vast territory of the hotel, hoping to catch at least a glimpse of their favorite actors. But security was strict. No one would get in without the necessary pass. Everyone knew that Keanu Reeves might show up at the party. Rumors about this had spread a week ago, when his manager mentioned that the actor would be in town during this period. In principle, he himself was not obliged to come. According to rumors, he was simply offered a role in a new project, the filming of which was planned for this location, and they were waiting for a decision. But the very fact that Keanu could drop in, without unnecessary noise, has already piqued the interest of the press and film professionals. Reeves himself is famous for appearing at events very suddenly, and at the same time not informing anyone in advance. Apparently, the desire not to attract unnecessary attention to himself is connected both with his modesty and with the reluctance to organize flash mobs of fans. However, the main character of the evening suddenly turned out to be not him, but the same security guard at the entrance, who was instructed to not let strangers in as strictly as possible. The story began with the fact that closer to the evening, when the line of guests was already moving towards the hotel doors, an unremarkable man in a black jacket appeared. He was unaccompanied and clearly did not try to shine with his appearance. Moreover, he was wearing a dark baseball cap, and in his hands he did not have an expensive briefcase or a folder with documents. When this man came closer, the guard, narrowing his eyes, stopped him with a gesture. He responded with a calm look and a slight smile, but did not say a word. It seems he was planning to extend an invitation or something like that. The guard said irritably, "An invitation," and immediately straightened up because those around him saw that someone dared to enter without any special chic. The man in the black jacket reached into his inside pocket, feeling for some paper. Perhaps he really did have an official confirmation. At that moment, a couple of other guests who had already entered turned around, as if they sensed something was wrong. They began to whisper, "This is." But they did not dare to approach, apparently afraid of attracting unnecessary glances and slowing down their own passage. The guard, not noticing this, continued to examine the uninvited guest from head to toe. In the end, he pulled out a small envelope, but before unfolding it, the guard snatched it and quickly glanced at what was written there. Judging by his facial expression, he did not find anything that somehow mentioned watching a film or being on the guest list. They say that a short dialogue began between them, which shocked the few witnesses who were standing nearby. The man muttered that he would like to meet the director, but he did not have time to get a formal pass because he was not notified in time. The guard only raised a mocking eyebrow and said something like, "That doesn't happen, friend. Either you have an invitation or get out of here. This is not a free pass and certainly not a fan meeting." At the same time, the man himself remained surprisingly calm. Perhaps he was used to such conversations. Perhaps he had already had to explain 100 times that he was not breaking the rules, but simply did not like ceremonies. But the guard clearly did not recognize him as a celebrity. In the dimly lit area at the entrance, and under the peak of the baseball cap, it was not so easy to make out his face. A slightly more careful look would have helped to understand that these features from films are known all over the world. The assistant director stood nearby, holding his breath. He knew who this man was, which was why he froze, watching the security guard ram him, not realizing that in front of him was Keanu Reeves himself. The assistant did not have time to contact the security chief directly. Everything was happening too quickly, and the phone rang, as luck would have it, distracting him. Keanu himself, apparently, did not want to make a scandal. He was famous for preferring not to advertise who he was once again. Perhaps he even wanted to check whether he could get in without using a big name. but the security guard, standing guard and seeing that they were slipping him a strange, unidentified envelope, began to get more and more irritated. A cold confidence froze on his face. It doesn't matter who you are, you won't get in without a clear pass. At some point, the guard saw that the guest was hesitating, continuing to say something in a quiet voice, and decided that he needed to act harshly. He took a step forward, came half a step closer to the man, and pointed towards the sidewalk with a push. "Come on, buddy, leave before I call for backup. We have a lot of smart guys here who think they can get in for free or because they think they are important people. But here everything is according to the rules. No badge, no entry." Perhaps in another place these words would have sounded polite, but in this context they were almost offensive. The guard's impulsiveness clearly prevailed over prudence. Instead of at least clarifying the guest's name, he was already making gestures indicating the exit. The people watching this scene began to whisper louder and louder. Some already recognized Keanu's face, despite the shadow of his cap. Another moment, and one of the guests decided to intervene, but Reeves himself beat them to it. Without raising his voice or making any sudden movements, he smiled at the security guard, a smile in which there was not a shadow of aggression or sullen resentment. And then, as eyewitnesses claim, he said, "I understand that you have a hard job. I don't want to cause problems, but let me at least show you what exactly is in the envelope." And then in the silence, the security guard could be heard snorting angrily. "Whatever it is, this is not an invitation." At that moment, the sounds finally reached him. Someone was whispering behind him, "Be careful, it's Keanu Reeves." Hearing the familiar name, the security guard seemed to freeze. He looked more closely at the stranger's face, and then, according to witnesses, his eyes widened. He seemed to try to pull himself together, but it was too late. His colleagues and one of the guests, and most importantly, Keanu himself, were all looking at him. Everyone around seemed stunned that the actor, who could have announced his name from the doorway, did not do so and allowed himself to be almost thrown out the door. Someone was already expecting the classic star outburst of indignation. They say that now Reeves will be outraged, say that the security guard exceeded his authority, and all that. But the reaction that everyone later talked about turned out to be completely different. Keanu is said to have simply shaken his head and said, "No need to apologize. You're doing your job. If every security guard was this meticulous, the world would be a little more organized." Then, noticing that the guard was at a loss for words, his face alternately flushed with embarrassment and fear, Keanu pulled him by the elbow to the side so as not to attract the attention of the crowd. There they chatted for literally half a minute. The actor briefly explained that he did have an agreement with the organizers, but technically he was not on the list because everything was decided at the last moment. The guard finally realized that he was a world-class star in front of him and that he could have gotten into a big scandal. But instead of indignation or demands for punishment, Reeves suddenly asked, "What's your name? This isn't your first time on duty here, is it?" He mumbled something unintelligible, and finally, according to eyewitnesses, Keanu said something like, "Don't blame yourself. You did the right thing by protecting the order. Thank you for your service." And he patted the man on the shoulder, smiling. It was so unexpected that the guard apparently was speechless, and then only managed to nod gloomily, unable to find a better answer. The entire conversation took less than a minute, but for those around them, these moments were imprinted as something phenomenal. A major celebrity going for a fully understanding and friendly conversation with a person who literally just tried to push him out. Usually such situations end with a loud "Don't you know who I am?" or a scandal with demands to call the boss. But Keanu, it seemed, adhered to a different model of behavior. This is what shocked everyone who witnessed it, and a little later, the entire industry, when the details leaked to the press. The assistant director, standing nearby, hurried to take the actor inside before they were surrounded by photo reporters and fans. Along the way, Keanu politely greeted a couple of familiar producers and, smiling, hid behind the doors. The security guard remained outside, not knowing how to hide his embarrassment. His colleagues, staring at him, asked him to tell what happened. He was obviously painfully embarrassed. He didn't know if he could even count on working after that. However, the information that Keanu himself had no objections to his measures spread very quickly. At the closed screening, where the actor eventually made it, there was a lot of excitement because everyone had already been discussing this episode. The organizers, of course, were shocked. Someone was running around apologizing, saying, "Sorry, we didn't warn you in advance." Someone was trying to persuade Keanu that the security guard should be transferred to another place, but he brushed it off. "It's okay. He did a great job." These words were passed from mouth to mouth among the film crew, becoming a kind of meme. The mood improved so much that, according to eyewitnesses, the director himself decided to throw a small reception ahead of time, jokingly saying, "Today we raised the bar on safety, but also the bar on kindness." Everyone understood what this line was about. But the story did not end with just the incident at the entrance. When the event was coming to an end and the guests were gradually leaving, Keanu went out into the hall. Apparently, he was about to leave. It turned out that the security guard who had previously been standing at the entrance was still on shift, but he was sitting in the corner with a dull look and apparently had given the checkpoint to a colleague. There was anxiety in his eyes. He was clearly afraid that his management would come to him and announce his dismissal or reprimand. But unexpectedly, Reeves himself approached him. The very same assistant director, apparently, pointed out the security guard to the actor, and Keanu sat down next to him without further ado. At first, they quietly talked about something. The guard was still fiddling with his cap, looking down at the floor. And then suddenly he burst into tears or almost cried, hiding his face. He whispered that he didn't want to offend the esteemed guest, that he was afraid of disrupting the event, that he only had instructions, and that he himself was now ashamed, because everyone would find out that he was the security guard who almost kicked out Keanu Reeves. And again, everyone who saw this scene froze at how humanely the actor behaved. He did not move away, did not laugh or joke, but sat down next to him, put his hand on the man's shoulder and said something like, "You did what you had to do. If there were more people in the world who could follow instructions honestly, we would have fewer problems. I really did come without an official pass, so your reaction is completely understandable. Don't apologize. Everything is fine." Response: the guard muttered that he might have lost his job because of his behavior. But then one of the organizers, shocked by this whole scene, came up and assured the man that no one was going to fire him. On the contrary, they would thank him for his diligence. To this, the guard could only shake his head. Probably everything inside him was turning over. The actor, whom he almost threw out, instead of taking revenge and reproaching him, sat next to him and calmed him down like a good comrade. The news that a security guard tried to throw out Keanu Reeves, and he praised him for being vigilant, spread across social networks almost instantly. First, short messages from guests who saw this story with their own eyes surfaced. Then an amateur video filmed on a phone appeared. It blurrily shows Keanu talking to a security guard at the entrance, and then amiably walking inside. Although the quality of the footage was average, reporters were delighted with the sensation, and it so happened that the episode blew up the internet. Everyone noted the contrast. In the show business industry, where many stars behave like nobles, raising a storm of indignation at the slightest infringement of their rights or underestimation of their status, Keanu behaved completely differently. He not only forgave the guard for his harshness, he also found words of support. Such an act only strengthened the legend that Reeves is one of the most down-to-earth, kind, and calm people in Hollywood. Many commentators wrote that they were convinced once again that where others would see a reason for scandal or a proud reminder of his fame, Keanu chose the path of humanity. There are many such stories in his biography, but each new one causes a storm of delight. They recalled other cases when he helped strangers on the street, when he quietly sent money to fired employees of the film crew, when he gave up his seat on public transport, or walked without security around the city. However, the situation with the security guard at the entrance to the hotel is special, because here we are talking about a direct confrontation, in which the star, by all rights, could have been indignant, but instead showed understanding. On fan forums, the events were discussed in such detail that some drew his gestures and deciphered possible phrases, although the participants themselves preferred not to give official interviews. It is also noteworthy that after this incident, the security guard was not only not fired, but was even promoted within a few weeks, as unofficial sources reported. The management decided that such an employee, who does not back down before the unknown, would show the necessary firmness in a real security breach situation. And the fact that he almost kicked out Keanu Reeves ended up being a funny episode that served as an advertisement for the strict access control measures. This fact was also discussed on social networks. People joked that everything turned out in the best possible way. Meanwhile, Keanu continued to live his normal life. The very next morning, he flew to another city to take part in a charity event. When reporters tried to get a comment from him at the airport, he only smiled modestly. The guy was just doing his job, nothing special. Please do not chase a sensation. But as always, his words only added fuel to the fire of interest. After all, in our time, the manifestation of true politeness and self-respect is a rarity. Then there was talk that the whole story was a staged PR stunt, supposedly designed to emphasize Reeves' image as a Hollywood saint. However, details and evidence show that everything happened spontaneously, and Keanu himself really doesn't like such hype. It's hard to imagine that he would be happy with such a scenario, in which he is deliberately made to look like an idiot at the threshold of a closed screening, and then he generously forgives the security guard. Those who know the actor well claim that he would never agree to such a production. It all looks too natural, an inattentive security guard trying to follow strict instructions, and a good-natured celebrity who didn't even say, "Young man, do you know who I am?" Anyone else in his place would have pulled out a phone and called one of the organizers, saying, "Resolve the issue immediately. I'm not used to standing in lines." But Keanu did everything differently. What really shocked people about this story is that it is an example of how one can react to a clear lack of understanding and even aggression, albeit official, not personal, from others. Many viewers took it as a lesson. When we are undeservedly stopped somewhere or our rights are questioned, we have a choice to shout, demand respect, inflame the conflict, or calmly and amicably settle the matter, saving face and respect for the other person. In a world where the cult of personal boundaries and momentary insults often reigns, the actor's actions looked truly atypical. Thus, a security guard tried to throw Keanu Reeves out. His reaction shocked everyone, is not just a loud headline, but a real situation in which the character and values of one of the most discussed Hollywood actors were clearly demonstrated. The event clearly showed that fame does not always raise a person above others. Sometimes it is just an external entourage, and inside there remains the same calm, attentive person, capable of understanding other people's responsibilities and mistakes. Many fans now joke, "I wonder if the security guard had thrown him out. Would Keanu have stood on the street and not been indignant?" Perhaps so. But most likely, someone from the team would have noticed the flaw. However, the very fact that he did not loudly declare his specialness already says a lot. Now recalling this episode, people online share their thoughts. Some believe that only someone who has gone through serious trials in life and understood that in a conflict, it is not the tug of war that is more important, but the ability to remain calm and humane. Others note, yes, this is the real Keanu. After all, he always behaves modestly, without demanding royal privileges. In any case, this little story continues to multiply his reputation. And if someone still doubted how simple Hollywood actors can be, then this case is a worthy answer. In conclusion, we are convinced that such examples fill our days with the belief that humanity has not left the world. The most amazing thing in this situation is the absence of any malicious intent on the part of all participants. The guard was simply protecting the order. Keanu did not want to show his peculiarity, and random witnesses received impressions for a lifetime. And this is probably the best scenario that can arise in the unpredictable chaos of a metropolis. where celebrities and ordinary people intersect on equal terms. It is moments like these that show that Keanu Reeves' reputation as one of the kindest and most modest actors in Hollywood is not invented by journalists, but is confirmed by real stories that happen without any cameras or scripts. If you were touched by this story, if you also believe that kindness and patience can diffuse even the most ridiculous situation, be sure to like, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us how you react to conflicts with strangers, and whether you believe that a calm reaction can save you from many problems and stress. Your stories and opinions are very important because this is how we help each other see. Even in the most tense circumstances, there is room for respect and kindness. And looking at the example of Keanu Reeves, you can be inspired and show a little more patience and humanity in everyday life. After all, you never know what a wonderful outcome can come out of the most difficult situation.